It's not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife.
The envelope arrived at Buckingham Palace on a Tuesday. No return address, no courier name, no explanation. Just a single sheet of paper, stamped with a government seal that would force the King of England to choose between protecting his son and protecting his throne. By Wednesday, 3 lawyers had read it. By Thursday, the King's private secretary had briefed Prince William behind closed doors. By Friday, the world knew a name they were never supposed to hear. And by Sunday, when the cameras gathered outside the gates of Montecito, Harry and Meghan's silence said more than any tell-all interview ever could. This is the story of a royal record that was never meant to go public. A verification no one wanted to request. And a family fracture that became a constitutional moment. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe right now, because what happens next will completely change the way you see the royal family. It started with a christening that never happened. For months, senior aides inside Buckingham Palace had been quietly asking the same question. When would Princess Lilibet's ceremonial blessing take place? It wasn't about tradition, it wasn't about photography, it was about paperwork. In British royal protocol, every child connected to the line of succession must be registered on something called the Councillors of State list. This isn't a symbolic document, it's a constitutional safeguard. It determines who can legally act on behalf of the monarch if the king becomes incapacitated, travels abroad, or is temporarily unable to fulfil duties. And here's the problem. Lilibet's name had never been added, neither had Archie's. At first, officials assumed it was an administrative delay. Montecito was far away. The children were young. Harry and Meghan had stepped back. But when aides formally requested the baptism record, standard procedure for registry inclusion, the response from California came back vague. Then it was delayed. Then it became defensive. One senior constitutional advisor later described the exchange as polite on the surface, but evasive beneath. That's when Buckingham Palace stopped asking politely, and that's when the Cabinet Office got involved. King Charles didn't want to believe the whispers. For years, he had tried to ignore the questions. The strange timeline around Archie's birth announcement, the conflicting details on the amended birth certificate, the refusal to name the hospital, the absence of the traditional photo on the steps. Charles had chalked it up to Harry and Meghan wanting privacy. He'd convinced himself it was about control, not concealment. But when his private secretary walked into his study one autumn morning and placed a leather folder on his desk, the king realised the institution had moved far beyond his personal feelings. The folder was marked sensitive, registry compliance, eyes only. Inside was a formal request, not from the palace, from the Cabinet Office, the heart of the British government. The request was clinical, professional, unnervous. It stated that in order to maintain the constitutional integrity of the Councillors of State Act, any individual listed in succession materials must have verified documentation of their bloodline connection to the reigning monarch. If the palace could not provide a hospital record, a baptism certificate, or a certified registry entry, there was one remaining option outlined in royal law: a genetic verification summary. This wasn't something new. The procedure had existed since the early 1700s, created during a time when succession disputes nearly collapsed the crown. It had been used exactly 4 times in British history, never publicised, rarely discussed, but legally airtight. Charles sat at his desk for 23 minutes without moving. Camilla entered quietly and stood near the window, watching him. She didn't ask what was in the folder. She already knew. Finally, Charles picked up his fountain pen. His hand hovered over the signature line. And then he signed. Not as a father, not as a grandfather, as a king. Harry found out in the worst possible way. Not through a private phone call from his father. Not through a formal letter delivered by courier. Not even through a warning from William. He found out through a portal notification. The royal family operates a private, encrypted digital system for sharing sensitive documents. It's where press statements are reviewed before release, where speeches are uploaded for approval, where legal files and constitutional records are stored. Harry technically still had access. No one had revoked it after he stepped back. It was one of those overlooked details, a digital thread still connecting him to the institution he'd walked away from. One morning in late April, he logged in to check a shared calendar for a Commonwealth event he'd been copied on by mistake. And that's when he saw it. A new file in the shared succession folder, uploaded at 4:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The file name was cold and bureaucratic. Succession clarification, April 2025, final version. Harry's stomach dropped. He opened it. The first paragraph was written in the language of lawyers and constitutional historians. In accordance with the Councillors of State Act 1937 and following a requested verification process conducted under Royal Household Authority. He didn't need to read the rest. He minimised the screen, stood up, walked to the window. Then he pulled out his phone and called Meghan. She was in the car with Archie and Lilibet, heading to a park. Harry's voice was flat. "Pull over. What's wrong? Just pull over, now." She did. And when he told her what he'd seen, Meghan didn't cry. She didn't shout. She sat in silence for nearly a minute, while the kids played with toys in the back seat. Then she said very quietly, "They went around us." Harry closed his eyes. "Yeah. This wasn't your father protecting the family, Harry. This was the institution protecting itself." She was right, and they both knew it. The first person in the family to know wasn't Harry. It was William. 3 weeks before the file was uploaded, the Prince of Wales had been summoned to a private meeting inside Buckingham Palace. Present in the room, the King's senior constitutional advisor, the Lord Chamberlain, the palace's head of communications. No aides, no notes. They told William the request had come from outside the palace walls, that it wasn't designed as punishment. It was about legal exposure. If the succession registry were ever challenged, by the press, by Parliament, by a foreign government, questioning diplomatic standing, the Crown had to be able to defend every name on that list. The verification wasn't optional anymore. It had become a constitutional necessity. William sat forward, his jaw tight. "And the children?" he asked. "Archie and Lilibet? Do their names have to appear in the public statement?" The advisor hesitated. "That depends on how the clarification is worded." William's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "Then word it carefully." Over the next 2 weeks, 4 separate drafts were written. The first version named Archie and Lilibet directly and referenced the genetic verification process in clinical detail. William rejected it immediately. "That will destroy them," he said. "Rewrite it." The second version was softer, but still named the children in connection with voluntary family verification procedures. William shook his head. "They're 5 and 3 years old. Try again." The third draft removed the children's names entirely and referenced only updated succession registry protocols following standard verification. It was vague, protective, but still truthful. William read it twice. Then he looked up at the advisors. "This one," he said, "and nothing more." When Harry called him 3 weeks later, voice shaking with rage, William didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just said, quietly, "I tried to make it hurt less." Harry hung up. But later that night, when Meghan asked what William had said, Harry repeated the line. And for the first time since the file appeared, Meghan paused, because she realised something. William hadn't stopped the process, but he'd fought to protect the children from being named. That didn't erase the betrayal, but it complicated it. Meghan knew exactly what the palace had done. They hadn't accused her of anything. They hadn't attacked her publicly. They hadn't released scandalous details. They'd done something far more effective. They'd made her irrelevant. The statement didn't ask for her response. It didn't invite her defence. It didn't need her permission. It simply existed, stamped, signed, sealed, and uploaded by the Crown. For years, Meghan had fought the royal institution with interviews, op-eds, legal letters, and carefully timed leaks to friendly journalists. But this time, the palace hadn't given her anything to fight. So she did the one thing no one expected. She called Catherine, not through palace aides, not through back-channel lawyers, directly. The call lasted 11 minutes. Catherine answered on the third ring. Her voice was cautious but not cold. "Meghan, I need to ask you something," Meghan said. "And I need the truth." There was a pause. "Go ahead. Will my children be safe from this?" Catherine didn't hesitate. "Yes." Meghan exhaled slowly. "You're sure?" "I made William promise me that part myself," Catherine said. "Their names won't appear. The statement is about process, not about them." Meghan's throat tightened. She hadn't expected clarity. She definitely hadn't expected protection. "Why?" Meghan asked. Catherine's voice softened. "Because they're children, and whatever happens between the adults, that has to still matter." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Meghan said, very quietly, "Thank you." It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't friendship, but it was the first real truce they'd had in years. When Meghan hung up, Harry was standing in the doorway. "What did she say?" "She said the kids are protected." Harry looked down. "Do you believe her?" Meghan thought about it, then nodded. "Yeah, I do." The statement went live at 6 a.m, Greenwich Mean Time on a Thursday. By 7:30 a.m, it was the lead story on BBC News, By 9 a.m., it had been picked up by CNN, Sky News, and Reuters. By noon, it was trending in 47 countries. And by 2 p.m., the world was waiting for one thing, Montecito's response. But it never came. No statement from Harry and Meghan's spokesperson. No exclusive interview announced. No leaked quotes to sympathetic outlets. Just silence. At first, the press assumed they were preparing something big. A legal response, a counter-statement, maybe even another sit-down interview. But as the hours passed, the silence continued. 1 day, 2 days, 3. Royal commentators were baffled. "This doesn't fit their pattern," one veteran journalist said on air. "Meghan and Harry always respond, always. So why aren't they responding now?" The answer, though no one said it out loud, was simple. Because they realised something the rest of the world didn't. The palace hadn't released this statement to destroy them. They'd released it to end the conversation. And the smartest move Harry and Meghan could make was to let it end. Fighting would only extend the story. Denying would invite more questions. Silence, for once, was strength. Meghan understood it first. Harry took longer, but eventually he agreed. They would say nothing. Not because they had nothing to say, but because saying nothing was the only move left that didn't make things worse. 3 weeks after the statement was released, something unexpected happened. A photograph surfaced online. It hadn't been staged. It wasn't part of an official engagement. It was taken by a member of the public at a small cafe in Windsor. The image showed Catherine sitting at a corner table with Princess Charlotte. Just the two of them. No security visible. No aides hovering nearby. On the table between them was a piece of paper, a child's drawing. Charlotte had made it at school that week. It showed 5 stick figures holding hands. Each one had a name written beneath it in wobbly handwriting. George, Charlotte, Louis. And then, smaller, but still there, Archie, Lilibet. The person who took the photo zoomed in later and posted a clearer version online. Within hours, it went viral. The palace never commented. Catherine never addressed it. But the message was unmistakable. The institution had drawn a line in the registry. But the family, the real family, the children who didn't understand borders or statements or silence, hadn't. Catherine had quietly made sure of that. Not in a statement, not in an interview, in a drawing. In the end, no one truly won. Charles kept the constitutional integrity of the crown intact. But he lost something far more fragile, his son's trust. William protected the monarchy and shielded the children from public naming, but he would carry the weight of that choice for the rest of his life. Catherine became the quiet hero in the shadows. The one who reminded everyone that children shouldn't pay for adult wars. But her name would never appear in the official story. And Harry and Meghan? They learned the hardest lesson of all. You can leave the institution, you can step back from the titles, you can move across an ocean, but the institution never lets you leave cleanly. There's always a record, always a registry, always a file with your name still attached. Archie and Lilibet will grow up one day. They'll hear the rumours, they'll read the headlines, they'll ask their parents the questions every child eventually asks. Why did this happen to us? And someone will have to find the words to answer. But for now, the file is sealed. The statement has been made, the record is official, and the silence, the heavy, painful, protective silence, remains. If this story left you speechless, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because the royal story is never really over. We'll see you in the next one.